When starting your off-grid journey, there's a lot to consider. And high on that list is, what are you going to do with wastewater? So today, we're here at Waterflow to meet Caleb and talk about sustainable and reliable wastewater solutions. Come and join me.
Nice to meet you.
G'day, Caleb.
Come on in, let's talk wastewater.
Yeah, let's go.
My name's Caleb Pirini. I work for a company called Waterflow, where I'm the National Sales Manager. So we've got three main bases of operation. So one in Waipapa, one here where we are now in Maungaturoto, and the other in Penrose in Auckland. Primarily, we're an on-site wastewater system designer and manufacturer. We tend to get involved in a few other sub-services around that industry, but that's our main core focus. So Stephen Hoyle, who is the father of current Managing Director Dean, started the business 26 years ago. So he was in the market for his own on-site wastewater system at the time. And I guess the industry back then sort of had two main options. So one was a traditional septic tank to some sort of trench or bed. And the other alternative, which was sort of just coming into the market at that time, was your higher powered aerated system. Granted, they're still on the market now, but the power consumption's much lower as technology's gotten better and better. He was after an alternative that sort of fitted the bill. So he wanted something that was better than a septic tank, potentially didn't need to treat as high as what an aerated system was, but also had that sort of feel-good factor for the customer that was looking for something that was a bit more sustainable. So less sludge accumulation, not having to get it trucked or sucked out off-site, and all those sort of parameters that people were actually asking for. So fast forward a few years, he ended up buying the whole thing. That's when he started to develop the product into, well, the Wormerator. About 20 years ago, it was then rebranded into Waterflow, purely because we were doing much more than just the natural flow production. We were installing the systems, we were purchasing and supplying and installing water tanks and pumps and drainage, and there's a whole history behind that, but that's sort of the nuts and bolts of it. So we manufacture essentially four main products. So you have a traditional septic tank, natural flow being a passive worm-based system, the Biopod being still a worm-based system but is approved to secondary treatment levels, and then EconoTreat, which is our higher level treatment system, and it's aerated. We get quite a few off-grid people coming to us asking for a wastewater system option, and I guess the main two popular products would be natural flow and then Biolytics, purely because natural flow is that all passive, very sustainably minded, more than often can be gravity fed to a disposal field. And then if we can't, or if we need a secondary treatment level, i.e. that next layer above, then we can push them into the Biopod, which sort of ticks that box from a council perspective, but still has that feel-good nature and is, I guess, more aligned to how an off-grid person is typically trying to live. When people think of Waterflow, they probably don't think of the brand, they probably more think about the people that they've encountered along the way, and I guess that sort of rolls into, I guess, our two main mission statements, if you want to put a term on them. One would be our sub-tagline underneath our branding, which is bringing clarity to wastewater, and it's such a almost dark art sort of witchcraft industry where you've sort of got an engineer on one end, a drain layer on another, the manufacturer sort of sitting on the sidelines picking and choosing what product is suitable, and we're trying to mold that all together and make it understandable for a homeowner or whatever customers in front of us to actually digest that information and make it relatable to whatever they're trying to achieve in the first place. And the next one would be to, I guess, protect our backyard. And that sounds quite, I guess, corny in a way, but if you think about what we're doing, you're taking a section, you're plunking a home on it, and then now we're treating your wastewater and discharging it to your land. If that doesn't have some sort of sustainability or some sort of long-term look after your backyard ethos, then we're all screwed. So welcome to the factory. So what we've done is we've set them all up with essentially their own little cubicles that have all the tools and all they'll need for the parts that they're making on that day. And then within this factory alone, we're focusing on, first and foremost, the plastic version of EconoTreat, which is that aerated system, and then the Biopod, which is that one of the vermiculture systems that we make. So on the left-hand side, we have the assembly line for the completed componentry that make up that second treatment tank.
Yep.
On my right-hand side here is where the initial septic tank is made. So those two combined make up that treatment system. And then on the far right-hand side, we have the Biopod. So once they've completed this stage, They are then moved across on that mezzanine floor. You can see there's a Biopod shell of the tank, but also all the componentry has been put inside it. So once that's done, that'll be moved, placed to our stockyard on the outside, and a new shell will be brought in. And those componentry there will be lifted up and placed inside that tank before the media is placed around it. So essentially it's working your way through, get made with that mezzanine floor so it's nice and easy for the guys to see, and then they're out and straight into storage. We quite often get asked what sustainability means to us, and to be honest, I think we need to look at what the definition of that word actually is before we can start diving into it a little bit deeper. So to us, it's about having land that's consistently able to be reused over and over and over again. But it all depends on the catchment. So you go back 100 years, you had 1 house per hectare, maybe. Now you've got a subdivision on that property, still using on-site wastewater systems, but there's maybe 200. So the amount of effluent that's potentially getting to that catchment, it's a night and day difference. We just can't compare it. So I know there's a lot of hesitancy to move to these higher level of treatment systems, but we sort of need to take a step back and almost an aerial view of everything and go, okay, what was the harm that we were causing back then? And was it negligent? Probably yes is the answer to that. But how do we keep that at as little harm level as possible while enabling construction and building and affordable housing, everything else that goes into, I guess, what we believe in, but also what off-grid believe in from what I've seen too. A significant amount of our client base are off-gridders. It's important for them to start to consider the design process quite early on, because it's not just what system or what treatment's going to be appropriate, but there could actually be the inclusion of at least a discharge pump into your power requirements. And if you don't know that early on and you're starting to look at what is this thing actually going to cost me, your solar could end up blowing out purely because the discharge pump or the aerator, whatever it might be, wasn't put into the equation. So it's always quite difficult to know like what's the definite best suited system for me as an off-gridder, but it's just having that consultation with the customer, ideally getting to site and looking at it and how's the land telling me that this needs to be dealt with. We always start that way and then we'll move to wherever we need to from there. So the production queue to our left is our EconoTreat product, and although it's aerated and typically not the most favourable thing for an off-gridder running on solar, purely because it has that power requirement, it is important to look at, because if you take someone that's in Taupo or Queenstown and those lake catchment zones that do have a nutrient discharge limit, this is going to be one of those systems that has to be implemented. So most of the magic in this system happens within these sheets of woven plastic, where essentially that's where all your bacterial buildup is going to be. So we have air coming below that block of plastic being blown up and through, so we're getting as even distribution as possible. So when that wastewater is in this tank being circulated, it's making a lot of contact and a lot of contact time with that media block, and that's what's going to lead to the high levels of treatment. So not the most favourable initial outcome for an off-gridder, because it is that higher power reliance, but when you're looking at what's sustainable now in this instance, and we're needing to have a system that is A, compliant, but B, actually removes all those things that could cause harm to that lake, then we need to look at something like this.
And does it run a pump full time, does it?
No, so it runs a blower that goes 9 hours on, 3 hours off.
Right.
So now we've got that understanding of the residential EconoTreat. This is one of our commercial ones that's almost finished in production and will be water tested later today. So still the same sort of technology. We've essentially got water inside this tank that's being aerated, so still channeling down, back up through a diffuser, still through blocks of media. They're just obviously much bigger to fill this sort of surface area. So this will be for a restaurant/cafe off the back of a winery in the Auckland region. Kind of cool to see one of them in the flesh.
It's massive, eh?
yeah. It's incredible when you see a few of them stacked next to each other as well. It's quite a sight. So council consents is another thing we often get asked about when anyone really that's building and requiring a septic system. So there's kind of two formats. So one is a permitted activity. So you're adhering to setbacks and you're within the council rules and regulations. And the other is a discharge consent, where you're breaking one or more rules, and it's up to someone like us or a wastewater engineer to come up with a plan that council accepts. Typically there's some sort of resource consent condition, whether it might be regular testing of the effluent quality, or it could be a flow meter. Depending on what rule you're breaking, that's typically what the consent will address. As far as costs, it can vary quite a lot. Like your typical building consent might be $2.5K or something along those lines, but if we take a discharge consent, it might be somewhere between the 7,000 to 10,000 rand, and that's typically just for a standalone residential building. As far as the who and the what, someone like us or someone like a reputable wastewater engineer can cater to the design, but then also the consent process. The other times it'll be dealt with still by someone like us, but it'll be accompanied with the sort of master submission of your building consent with your builder or whoever may be addressing that. We're quite an interesting business. So obviously we're trying to make profit and no one's going to hide behind that, but we also fall into this education piece within our industry. And again, if you use our tagline, that bringing clarity to wastewater, it really is true. Like there's so much mystique behind it. No one quite knows where to start, where to stop, what system's appropriate, what system's not appropriate. So we go as far as, for most times, if someone calls and they've just asked us some general information, we probably give away more trade secrets than we probably should. Not that they're secrets to us. We also do other things like, I guess, try and make this whole industry perform better. Because if councils and developers actually have the confidence behind an on-site wastewater system being able to deliver consistently, then things like a unitary plan change can happen and all of a sudden more rural blocks get cut up, or all those sort of things. So it actually has a much wider scope than what you would think. One of the more popular off-grid products is Biopod, is this one behind us. So that's that semi-passive worm-based or vermiculture-based treatment system, secondary treated, councils like it, ticks all the boxes. So I figured while we've got it here, we may as well go through it in a little bit more detail about how it actually works. So I think the easiest way to think about it, if you were to literally grab a kid's lunchbox or an ice cream container, fill it up with bark, and then you were to place your toilet waste over top of it, you would have your solids that would stay at the top and your water would trickle down to the bottom. So as it moves its way through that bark or whatever medium we place in front of it, that grows a bacterial film over time, and that contact time with that water is what actually treats your wastewater. Right. So your solids that have stayed at the top, that's where the worms will live, and they'll slowly digest and break that down, and their excrement is liquid. So again, moves its way down to the bottom of that tank. There's a pump well in the middle, so then once it reaches that bottom pump well, that pumps on a float switch, that triggers, and then pumps out to your disposal field. Right. So from an off-gridder's point of view, running on solar, you're going, okay, pumps, power, but the reality is we're talking 0.45 kilowatt hours a day to run the little blower, and then your pump might go 2 or 3 times depending on the size of the house. So arguably 1.5 kilowatt hours, which is probably about the same to run a pretty energy efficient freezer in today's market. So just to give it some sort of comparison.
Yeah.
Right, so one of the other systems that's quite popular with off-gridders that I wanted to show you is that original natural flow line with, I guess, the bread and butter being the wormerator, which is this green tank behind us here. Natural flow is a little bit different than the Biopod. Like, they both obviously use vermiculture as that sort of solid or sludge mitigation, but with natural flow, we separate black and grey water, and the reason it was designed that way is that it's just that little bit more robust. So with black water, it needs more time for solids to sit on top and be digested, and then water to trickle, whereas the majority of your wastewater you're producing is actually grey water. So having that separate dose chamber that's taking all your grey water, providing a preliminary filter, and then getting it out to the disposal field as quickly as possible with the treated grey water in combination of that, that's the secret to its success. And then with that separate dose chamber, we now have the ability to look at, okay, is this a flat site and we need to use a discharge pump? Or do we have enough slope to create head pressure with a siphon or a flout where we can actually have this whole thing being power free? So solar, obviously you're self-reliant, but let's say, batteries ran out, but you still got running water, your wastewater system's still fully functional. Nothing has changed. You don't have to change a single thing about it. So that's the beauty behind this thing.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just way more robust. Waterflow's by no means finished, I guess, with that sort of 4 main product segment. We're always looking for innovative ways to either treat or dispose wastewater. So whether that's different technology types, whether that's different disposal field types, it's one of those industries where innovation isn't frowned upon, but it's quite complicated to actually get it through council because it has to be tested, it has to be compliant, all those factors. So I guess we're always going to advocate for the customer and for the land, and we don't think that our current product lineup is by all means finished. Favourite part of working here would probably be the fact that I get to lead a really cool bunch of people that are actually helping people. So whether it's the bringing clarity to wastewater side of it, or whether it's the building an actual solution that's workable, whether it's partnering with a drain layer and helping them either build up the septic tank side of their business, which clearly we benefit from, but they also get a revenue stream from that too. So it really is just people helping people, and it's awesome.